pick up the headset, get theirs, and settled in their seats. Well, good morning. Ohayou gozaimasu. Thank you for joining us. This is the most, technically speaking, the most complicated event that we have undertaken in Sepsis Center. This event is simultaneously translated, and this is a hybrid event. So I think the level of complexity, we bring it up on this one, but I think this event was completely worth it. We are extremely privileged to welcome a delegation from Japan America Air Force Goodwill Association, headed by General Yoshiyuki Sugiyama, who is sitting left of me. He's a former chief of staff of Japan Air Defense Force, and he has been my good mentor for a number of years. So when I had the opportunity that I can host his delegation, I didn't have an option to say no. So I'm very, very glad that he is with us. And I'm extremely glad, I'm equally happy that the Chip Grayson was able to join us this morning. Chip, to many of you, needs no introduction. He's a former, he's a retired lieutenant general from U.S. Marine Corps. He led the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force many years ago. And he also, most recently, he served as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific under the Obama administration. So welcome, Chip.
Thank you.
And a couple of housekeeping rules. So for those of you who pick up that headset on your way out after this event, please return them where exactly you picked them up. They are very expensive equipment. We're going to get charged for any equipment that was not returned. So please be mindful of that. And let me go through the order of the events. I will open the session by posing one question to each of our panelists, and we will move to taking questions from the floor. But since we do have a Zoom audience as well, I will go back and forth, one question from the floor and one question online, and we'll try to take as many questions as possible. And we will end promptly at 11:30. So with that, gentlemen, welcome. So General Sugiyama, let me first go to you. As we've been discussing a lot has changed in Japan's security environment since the beginning of 2022. And unfortunately for Japan, not for the better. How do the recent developments on both global and regional security, including Russian invasion of Ukraine and greater threats emerging across Taiwan Strait, how do they impact Japan's strategic thinking?
ありがとうございます。ここでこうして我々の考えやいろんなことについて紹介できるというそのチャンスをいただいたことを本当にありがたく思います。今日はできるだけ、私の個人的な意見ということが多いんですけれども、フランクにオープンに直接的に私の意見を話させていただきたいということを決してオフィシャルな話じゃないということを確認していただきたいというふうに思います。ハワイを経由してここに来て5日目、6日目くらいでしょうか。頭の中がイングリッシュとジャパニーズでコンフューズしているので非常にいきなりなんか英語が出てきそうなプアなイングリッシュですけども、そんなんでコンフューズしていることをちょっとお許しいただきたいなというふうに思います。ウクライナ戦争のことについては非常にどういうんでしょうか、とても驚きました。簡単に言えば、起きてはならないことが起きたという感じがあります。それは逆に言うとですね、起きてはならないというのは、そういう戦争は起きないと思っていたというところが正直なところだと思っていて、この、世界的な協調の時代に、あからさまな侵略が行われるということについて、私、本当にびっくりしたというところなんですけども、それがしかも、国連のパーマネント5の一国が、検証に背いてというんでしょうか、本当にそんな侵略をするということ自体が起きたということ、しかもそのパーマネント5の一国が核を持って恫喝する、そういうことが起きたということが、ある意味、 第二次世界大戦以降の安全保障体制を本当根幹から揺るがすしかねない、そういう、ことだというふうに思っているというところです。で、ユークレインウォーのことについてちょっと話をすると、まずはですね、ロシアがどうしてあんな、プアなオペレーションをしたのかというのが信じられません。軍事大国であるロシア、それは本当に経済的には非常に困難なところを迎えているんですが、アメリカと匹敵するだけの軍事力を持っていると信じていたロシアがなぜあんなプアなオペレーションしかできないんだということについては、今日はその話について今話をしませんけれども、非常に驚いたということ、特に空軍という観点で言うと、エアスーペリオリティ、航空優勢を取れなかったということが、今でも取れてませんけれども、ちょっとなぜかというのはもうちょっと深刻に考えてみないと、真剣に考えてみないといけないかなというふうに思っているというところです。一つ、まだ終わってないわけですけども、オーバーオールというのか全体像を見てて思うのは、戦争というのは思うようにマネージ、コントロールできないんだということがよく分かったということは非常に大きいと思います。ロシアはウクライナに対して短い戦争を仕掛けて、それで達成できると信じてたわけですよね。だけども、それができなかった。そこにはいろんな理由があるんですけども、総じて言うならば、やはり戦争って何が起きるかわからないから、マネージしようとして、例えば、どの程度の、テンションで、どれくらいの長さで終わろうとしても終わらないということが、世界的な、いろんな人に分かったということ。ぜひとも中国もこのことについてよく理解してくれたらありがたいなというふうに思うというところです。それと、さらに言うと、ウクライナの人たちがこんなに自分の国を守るっていうことに対して、真剣に、しかも、レジリエンシーを持ってやれてるってことに驚きを感じます。驚きと言っては失礼かもしれませんけども、2014年のクリミア侵攻の時には、なすすべなくロシアに負けたわけですね。だけれども、このたった8年の間に、いろんな改善をして、しかも国民が一致して、ロシアに対しているってことに対して敬意を感じますし、非常に我々日本としても学ばなきゃいけないなというふうに思います。まさしく今回の件については、日本人もやっとと言っていいか分かりませんけれども、いろんな意味で覚醒し始めているのかなというふうに感じているというところです。覚醒し始めているという意味はですね、どういうことかっていうと、防衛政策が今変わろうとしている、変えられようとしているというふうに思っています。日本政府はこの年末にかけて、防衛、なんていうんですか、ディフェンスドキュメント、防衛、大綱、関連の文書、3つあるんですけれども、ナショナルセキュリティストラテジー、日本語で言えなくなっちゃってますね。防衛計画の大綱と、中期防衛力整備計画の3つを、見直そうとしています。その中でいくつかポイントがあって、まだもし知ってる範囲というか、これは私ガバメントの人間ではないので、正確に知っているわけではないけれども、こんな変更があったらありがたいなってことを述べたいと思うんですけれども、一つ大きなポイントは2つあって、1つは長距離の打撃力を持とうと。何か攻撃をされたときに反撃能力として、長距離の打撃力を持とうということが1つ。もう1つは、責任に見合った、防衛力整備をするために予算を増やそうという方向にあるということ。このことについては大きな日本の変更しようとしているポイントだというふうに思っています。最後に一つ話をしたいのは、ウクライナ戦争というのが、じゃあ中国がどんなレッスンズランを得ているか分かりませんけれども、台湾に対する中国の侵攻が、よく言われているのは2027年が非常に危ない年だって言われているわけですけれども、 それを早くしたか遅くしたかっていう話をすると、私自身は遅くなったんだろうと思っています。ただ、中国は絶対に台湾を諦めません。だから我々は中国が何かすることに対しては抑止しなきゃいけないし、必要になったら戦って勝たなきゃいけない。そういう実際に戦って勝つためのケーパビリティを持つということが、逆に抑止につながるんだと私は思っています。そこで一番大事なのは、やっぱり、パシフィックリージョンのコーナーストーンである日米の協力体制、アライアンスというのが一番大事で、これはもうどれだけ強める、深めたとしても足りない、どんどんもうさらに強化していく必要があるんだというふうに私自身は思っています。以上でコメント終わります。
Thank you, Sugiyama-san. Great points that you raised. So given what he just said, Chip, let me come to you next. In your view, what are some of the things that U.S. and Japan can work together to deter the threats and improve not just Northeast Asian security environment, but then more in Indo-Pacific regional security environment more broadly?
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for the opportunity to share the platform here with General Sugiyama and to meet with old friends from Japan with the delegation. I think the most profound thing is we need to realize how much things have changed since the beginning of our alliance. When the alliance began, neither North Korea nor China had any ability to project power beyond their own shoreline. We had a war in Korea. Japan became the sanctuary, and Korea became the combat theater, and that condition lasted for the rest of the 20th century. Sometime in the middle 90s, China started working on procuring the means, building the means to exert sea control or to maintain sea control and air control from the land, taking advantage of their vast geographic sanctuary and the increasing range of missiles that can be hidden in that area. Since that time, China's continued on a massive building program, but more importantly, technology has advanced to the point where surveillance is everywhere. It's very accurate, it's pervasive. China uses it internally, of course, but there's also the international aspect where they can surveil any target they want, and they can find things. And weapons are fast and accurate at distance, which puts Japan and U.S. forces in Japan and elsewhere, like Guam, within the Chinese weapons engagement zone. So now the situation has become that China is in every bit as much of a be prepared to fight tonight situation as is South Korea, which is right next to North Korea, as everybody knows. We need to be able to react to this, and we need to be able to build a deterrent power based on being able to integrate U.S. and Japanese forces to the point where we're interdependent, interchangeable, and can achieve an operating tempo faster than China can produce. We will be fighting outnumbered. That's not the end of the story, as we see in Ukraine, but we need to be able to integrate our forces so that we're all in the same fight, and this is possible. Our Japanese friends have teased us once again with the potential of a new national security strategy coming out before the end of the year. It's remarkable. The last one, I believe, was 2013. That was also the first one. So this is the second ever articulation of national security strategy. And if what we've heard is going to be in here, this is going to be a major step forward, and will lead to the National Defense Program Guidelines for Japan, not Alliance Defense Guidelines, but National Defense Program Guidelines for Japan, and the Midterm Defense Plan, and we're all looking forward to it. One of the things that is rumored to be in a national security strategy is the creation of a joint operational headquarters in Japan to manage and integrate the operations of the maritime, the air, and the ground self-defense force. This will be terrific. All three forces are capable in their own domains, but because the range of weapons these days makes all the terrestrial domains of conflict, air, land, and sea, overlap with each other. And the only way to fight intelligently is to be able to integrate the fires and maneuver from all of these forces. So with that on the as a foundation to start enhancing Japan's joint capability, I submit the United States should provide, number one, all appropriate assistance to our Japanese friends as they build this thing. There's no need for Japan to repeat all the mistakes that the United States made while we were trying to figure out how to integrate forces in different domains. We can help with that. We have on any given day from the service that I grew up in, the United States Marine Corps, we have 14 or 15 trained bilingual Japan foreign area officers on duty in Japan. I would think we would offer all of these to General Sugiyama's successors and Maritime Self-Defense Force and the Air Self-Defense Force to be able to embed and help with this in the Japanese headquarters as the Japanese would see fit. The other thing we need to do is have an equivalent American headquarters as the Japanese headquarters ability matures, so that we can do detailed contingency planning, US and Japan, so that we can detect the things that need to be changed, not only on the military side, but on the political side, so that, for example, if we discover something that has to be changed in law or in practice, we can go to our policymakers, both on the US and the Japanese side, with a body of analysis gained from realistic exercises to say, here's an impediment. We think something needs to be changed. This is what we think needs to be changed, so that it's not just a military effort, it's an all of government effort, all of alliance effort between the US and Japan, so that we can build the strongest possible deterrence. I'm a strong optimist on the way things are developing in Japan, and I look forward to the long rumored documents that are due by the end of the year, according to Japan's dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Chip. We all hope that those long rumored will be true, right?
Of course, we have our own long rumored results that we're waiting for too on the US side and many things. So
Yes.
this is not a critique of Japan, it's a critique of bureaucracy in general. Like,
And after all these long rumored documents have come out on both sides, then we're going to start talking about long rumored, another revision of the defense guidelines, I'm sure. That seemed to be the cycle that we're going
Yeah.
through. Thank you both for your opening thoughts. We will be moving into the Q&A from the audience. And like I said, this is a hybrid audience. So the first question come actually from the Zoom viewer. So for those of you who will be asking questions on the floor, please do wait until the microphone gets to you. And for the sake of the interpreters, please do speak a little bit slower than you normally would. Then I would appreciate it. And you can ask a question either in Japanese or English. So the first question comes from Terrence Matsuo. Hi, Terrence. Thanks for watching. This is probably for you, General Sugiyama. And then again, this is your personal view. In light of the changing regional security situation by China and North Korea, and the assassination of a former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, how should we evaluate now the prospect for constitutional revision in Japan? And maybe to you, Chip, perhaps after General Sugiyama gives his thought, would that have a positive or negative effect on the US-Japan alliance? So I will start with you, Sugiyama-san, and probably I will ask Chip to jump in toward the end.
質問ありがとうございます。私、その安倍首相という偉大なリーダーが亡くなったということについては、本当に日本の 損失というだけではなくて、世界の損失だというふうに思っています。で、あれほどの強いリーダーシップを持って、全てをリードしていくっていうリーダーが、なかなか次には来てないのかもしれないと思いつつ、さはさりながら、先ほども言いました、現政権もそうですけれども、必要になればやらなきゃいけないっていうことを、認識されているんだと私は理解していて、きっと、憲法の改正についても、ちょっと少しどれくらい時間かかるかわかりませんけど、実現できるのではないかと楽観的に私は思っています。
Thank you. So Chip, how do you think that if that long process will come to fruition, how do you see that impacts the dynamics between our two allies?
I think it'd be positively. Prime Minister Abe proved that change can happen in major form and fairly rapidly. He's going down in history as one of Japan's most effective, most distinguished prime ministers, I think, not just for what he did inside Japan, but for Japan's position internationally. He was a realist, and I think from my point of view, I see his successors carrying on with the same sense of realism. Japan recently stated that Taiwan's security is Japan's security. I don't think a couple decades ago that we would have expected such a statement, but that's the type of leadership that we need. And I remain an optimist that Prime Minister Abe's legacy will live on.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there I can take a question from the gentleman over here. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. I better try this in English. I'm Greg Rushford. There have been scattered news reports in recent months that the Japanese and American Coast Guards will be working with countries, allies like the Philippines, on maritime security. The Maldives government, I believe, is on record as asking for that. Could you tell me what's going on and how important you think this is?
Maybe I'll start from you, Chip, and then perhaps Sugiyama-san.
Personal opinion, we've had a slow rolling situation that desperately needs attention for a long time, and that's the degradation of the marine small m environment. China famously dredged up 3,000 acres of coral from the bottom of the South China Sea at great risk to the ecosystem of the South China Sea, threatening food shortages potentially throughout the region and beyond. We have illegal, unregulated, unreported fishing going on in numerous places, including use of explosives and things. This is not going to end well unless we find ways to build international cooperation to start tamping this down and protect the legal fishermen while prosecuting the illegal fishermen and those using illegal, damaging means to harvest the crop. Getting international cooperation has proven exceptionally difficult. For example, you can get nations to sign on, yes, we ought to stop this, we ought to stop that, but not in my area, because that affects my fishermen and my citizens. So this is going to still require some work as we go forward. Another reason for more of this cooperation is that going back to the South China Sea again, we need to build Coast Guard cooperation across the South China Sea to prevent China from bullying legal fishermen from, say, the Philippines out of the Philippine exclusive economic zone and out of their own territorial waters. So this is a positive. It's difficult, but I hope it will continue, and I hope it'll pick up some momentum.
General Sugiyama.
ありがとうございます。日米、フィリピンで3カ国でという話で、 残念ながら私はエアフォース外なので、海のことについてあまり詳しくはないんですが、私、この地域に限らず世界的に、同じ価値観を有する国が集まって、協力的にいろんな活動をする、仲間を増やす、パートナーシップを深めるということは、非常に我々にとって重要なことだというふうに思っています。で、その一環だと今回のその演習も理解しているんですけれども、アメリカは、この太平洋地域でシーズ・イニシアチブという、仲間を増やす努力というのを継続しています。で、具体的に日本は同じようなイニシアチブ、名前は付けていませんけれども、そういうイニシアチブに協力をするっていうことが日米にとって、日米もそうですし、さらにその友好国に対して2カ国でコミットするということが非常に重要なことだというふうに思っているというところです。それが1点目です。2つ目はですね、フィリピンという国が非常にASEAN の国というのは難しさを、中国に近いということもあるんだと思いますけれども、難しさを持ってます。政治的にも経済的にも。そういうフィリピンという国に対して、日米が一緒にコミットをするということは極めて重要なことだと思っている。そういう一環での活動だというふうに思っています。
Thank you both. Next question, again, comes from the Zoom audience. Kyle Patterson. Thank you, Kyle, for your question. So this is also probably, I will start with you, General Sugiyama. Has the attack of war in Ukraine and the growing military aggression of Russia renewed debate or concerns in Japan over the territorial status of the Northern Territories, Kuril Islands? Do you feel that the de facto Russian control of those islands pose any tangible security threat to Japan?
ありがとうございます。私自身、ロシア、いろんな国との領土問題を日本は持っているんですけれども、決して日本はそれを、暴力を持ってというのか、戦争行為で取り返そうということは、決してしないというふうに思います。で、残念ながら歴史が証明するように、ほとんどの歴史が証明するように、取られた領土というのはなかなか返ってこないというのが事実であって、忍耐を持って外交やいろんな努力をしていく必要があるんだろうというふうに思っています。戦略的なというのか分かりません。私自身個人的には中国と比べればロシアというのは経済的には非常に、難しさを抱えている国、世界の GDP でも11位とかっていう国だっていう意味で言うと、その国が大きな、核戦力、アメリカと匹敵するような核戦力を維持していながら、通常兵力の世界でも同じようなケーパビリティを持つというのは非常に困難だろうというふうに私は思っている。で、残念ながらロシアは必要な時には核を先制使用することもあり得ると、自分たちのスレッドに対してはですね、ということを言っていることはあるんですけども、基本的にはコンベンショナル世界で軍事力を発揮するというのが主になるだろう。その時に、じゃあ、ロシアは確かに大きなスレッドだと思いますけれども、アジアで日本に対して大きなスレッドになるかって言ったら、私はそんなことはないというふうに思っているということです。特にユクレーンで起こるようなヨーロッパに対してというのと、アジアで日本に対してというのは、私は違うというふうに思っています。
I can take another question from the floor if you lay in back.
Hi, thank you both. My name is Gina Park, reporter from GTBC, and I know that today's event is about US-Japan alliance, but I was wondering if you could say anything about what would the role of South Korea be in this new landscape regarding Taiwan and Russia? What would the expectations be from the US and Japan?
That's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. I will start with you, Chip, and ask us again, what's not to follow.
That's a very good question, and it helps to broaden the situation out a bit. We in America tend to segregate the different conflicts in Asia in our thinking and in our planning. We have the potential Taiwan contingency, and we consider that as happening by itself. We have the potential Russian movement on the Kurils, and we consider that as a separate thing. And most obviously, we have U.S. forces in Korea, and they're totally dedicated to conflict on the Korean Peninsula. Given what I mentioned before, I think with the range of weapons being what it is, and with the other things that affect what looks like the state of modern combat that we see going on in Ukraine, I think we need to start assuming that a conflict that starts anywhere in Asia is going to go everywhere. If we start a conflict in Asia over Taiwan, for example, I don't expect Kim Jong-un to miss an opportunity for mischief on the Korean Peninsula of some scale. So, while they don't have to be formal allies, Russia, China, and North Korea operating same way, same day in cooperation has got to be considered something very definite. So the role of Korea would be mount a significant and successful defense of Korean national interest, and then as things develop elsewhere, we can look to see what other things might have to be done. But I would, again, unlike 1950, I would not anticipate a conflict in Korea to stay confined to the peninsula, and vice versa. If conflict started anywhere else, I would think that Korea needs to be on very high alert, because opportunities for a dictatorial leader tend to cause action in that situation.
杉山さん。
ありがとうございます。非常にいい質問ありがとうございます。私自身、韓国というのは、我々にとってはもう本当に最も大事な、ネイバーというふうに思っていて、で、なかなか政治的には難しい部分が今まで続いてきているこの数年ですね、なんですけれども、そういう意味ではそれを乗り越えてでも、具体的に実質的な軍事的なセキュリティに関する活動というのは、強めていくべきだと私は思っているというところです。特にコロナのこともあり、両国間の交流というのがなくなっていたりするわけですけども、どんなに例えば大変な実会であったとしても、ディスカッション、いろんな話をするパイプというのを維持するというのが、私自身は大事だと思っています。で、今、政権が変わったこともあり、いろんなグループが韓国との交流を今再開しようというふうにいろんな検討しているというふうに私は思っています。で、具体的に我々もそのことに何とか参画したいなと思っているんですけれども、いずれにせよ、韓国という国の重要性は、チップさんが言ったように非常に我々の安全保障にとっては大事で、協力関係、やはりアメリカを中心とした日米、日韓というこの3カ国の関係というのは非常に重要だというふうに私は思っています。
I can take one more question from the floor before returning to the Zoom audience question. If you have, if there is one, if you can raise your hand.
Hello, yes, thank you. My name is Nick Velez. I'm a master's candidate for Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. And for one of my research papers, I'm studying the factions within the Japanese government. So I was wondering, with the death of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and him leading the biggest faction within the LDP, if there will become any instability or changing dynamics that will affect the US and Japan alliance. Thank you.
I think that has to start with you, Sugiyama-san.
質問ありがとうございます。私も専門家ではないので、まさしく、オープンソースからの話しか分かりませんが、 今非常に安定した政権をずっと運営してましたけれども、今、特殊な宗教関係のことでいろいろ、揉めているというのか、それで自由民主党自体、政権党与党の中での今揺らぎがあって、どう落ち着くのかはしばらく時間がかかるだろうということがあると思います。それと、やはり、安倍首相が亡くなったということは、非常に政権与党の中の一番の派閥、大きな派閥だということもありますけれども、その強いリーダーがいなくなったということで、その派閥がこれからどうなっていくかということは、日本のこれからの自民党の中の、権力だけではなくて、日本がどこういう方向に行くんだということにも影響するくらい大きなことだと私は思っているということです。
So I'll go back. Thank you. I'll return to the question from our Zoom audience. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, the other day in his address to the United Nations General Assembly, he underlined the need to reform the UN Security Council, which was, frankly, not able to respond effectively to the war in Ukraine. And also this has been the long-term Japanese diplomatic goal as well, the security of the reform of the UN Security Council. How should we expect the US to view these efforts, particularly given Japan's, not just Japan's rising prominence in addressing regional and global issues, but also this goal of reforming the Security Council has been the shared goal between US and Japan. But then also this is one area that the US and Japan slightly often disagreed on how to go about it. So I will start that with you, Chip, and then ask for Sugiyama-san's additional thought.
Commenting on the UN is only slightly less difficult than commenting on Japanese factions from an American point of view.
I'm gonna make it even for you too.
We should, for many reasons, both directly related to the UN and overall, I would argue, support Japan's efforts with the UN. We have the specter now of a member of the Perm 5 at the UN waging an unjust war in Ukraine. So it's hard to argue that the UN does not need change.
Any additional thoughts?
Thank you. 冒頭の話をしたようにですね、パーマネント5の一国が今回のことを、ロシアがあんなことをするってこと自体が大問題ですけれども、残念ながら今の国連というのは、自分たちの目的を達成するためのツールでしかないというふうには私は思っています。なので、それは何らかの改革をして、実効的にセキュリティイシューに対して、コミットできるというのか、影響力をちゃんと持てるようなシステムなりを作っていくということが、非常にこれからの世界にとって重要だと思います。きっと日本がやっていることに対しては、米国も本当に支援してくれるというか、サポートしてくれると私は信じています。
Thank you. I can take a question from the floor again. Can go back.
Hi, my name is Shinichi Akiyama, journalist for Mainichi newspaper. Thank you for this opportunity. My question is about Taiwan. As far as I know, there is a limited communication or cooperation with Taiwan, I mean the militarily. So in the future, how the Japan self-defense force and the US military will increase and improve the direct communication or cooperation with Taiwan?
That is a very interesting topic. Sugiyama-san.
いい質問ありがとうございます。なかなか台湾というのは国って言えないという意味で言うと、エンティティとかって言い方をしますけれども、少なくとも同じ我々と価値観を共有する国であって、それが一国二制度だとか言いますけれども、香港を見たときに PLA が、二制度を許して、今の台湾をそのまま維持してくれるかって言ったら、そんなことはないと思っていて、私は、非常に政治的に難しいけれども、台湾というのは今のままの形を維持するような、努力をしてほしいし、我々もそれを支援すべきだろうというふうに思っています。で、どういうふうにっていうのは具体的に今なかなか言えないんですけれども、米国を含めた3カ国でいろんなことについて話し合って、いろんなことについて支援する仕組みやあるいは成果を上げていくようにすべきだというふうに私は思っています。
Chip, any thought on that?
Yes, we often get in public arguments in the United States, we get lost in our own dialogue about our relationship with Taiwan. Yeah, Taiwan Relations Act, the 3 communiques, the 6 assurances, all these things. It all boils down to it's predicated on a peaceful, willing integration of Taiwan with China. And I say integration or unification because it has to be something that is supported by Taiwan. And it's not reunification. Taiwan's never been part of of communist China. At the root, we are obliged to make sure Taiwan has the ability to resist coercion. Certainly an invasion is a form of coercion. So we have a well-established program of providing Taiwan with defense goods and services to ensure their ability to defend themselves. It's been we had a policy that started back in 1979 when Chiang Kai-shek was still the president of Taiwan. He was an autocratic leader. He had Taiwan under martial law. And we were as worried about Chiang going across the strait toward China as we were about China coming the other direction. So strategic ambiguity in short form came out of that. The times have changed. Taiwan's a different nation now. They became a democracy on their own in the 90s. They are a de facto independent democratic nation sitting off the coast of China. China has made no effort for quite some time to induce Taiwan to willingly unify with the mainland, so we support that. What we would do is a subject of much speculation in the media now. We've now had President Biden saying on 4 different occasions that yes, we would fight for Taiwan, and only to have his staff come back around and say, well, what the president meant to say was, and anybody that's been in a position of responsibility knows how irritating it is for one of your subordinates to say what the old man meant to say was. So for my money, believe the president. We would do that. There's a problem of interoperability. We don't have the same relationship, of course, between the Taiwan military and the U.S. that we have with Japan, but there are workarounds, and we would do that. Moving through Congress now are the Taiwan Policy Act, which includes a tremendous amount of very interesting items. There's another couple pieces of legislation kicking around there. It's going to be very interesting to watch and see how these are treated when they come out of committee and they've been approved. The TPA has been approved in the Senate committee. It'll be interesting to see what happens when it goes to the House and the administration gets to comment on it. But there's differing opinions about it. Certainly it'll get China's attention. One of the things that we might want to do, in my opinion, is that before we start going forward with things in the Taiwan Policy Act, we might want to reinforce what we're doing with our forces in the Pacific and with our policy in the Pacific to make sure we strengthen deterrence even more. So this, as you have noted from your career with the Mainichi, this will require very careful handling, and it bears watching.
Thank you. Next question come from, again, Zoom audience, Yusuke Uchida, who's actually active duty Maritime Self-Defense Force officer studying at the Carnegie Mellon currently. This is probably for Chip. Does Hub and Spoke Alliance in East Asia provide sufficient military deterrence to reduce PRC military ambition, whatever that may be?
Well, we certainly hope so. Hub and Spoke is different than NATO, and there's not going to be a NATO-like arrangement in the Pacific anytime in any relevant time. The coordination required can be done. It's a little different than NATO, but that's the hub and spoke arrangement is not an issue as far as being able to establish a solid front. I might add, there was a comment earlier about the Philippines. Japan has been very, very helpful to the Philippines, particularly with their Philippine Coast Guard. Japan has also been very, very active through the Japanese Bank of International Cooperation in competition with the Belt and Road Initiative. So Japan has been, Prime Minister Abe again, kept the Trans-Pacific Partnership alive after the United States ran into political difficulties where the leading candidate from each of our parties in the 2016 election was walking away from trade agreements as fast as they could. It was what they say in soccer, or what the rest of the world calls football, an own goal, that's for sure. But Prime Minister Abe was able to keep it alive. So that's another contribution, regardless of the sometimes cumbersome belt of the hub and spoke looks like, but it's been Japan's been a leader across the Pacific and across the region and all these things, and that's been tremendously helpful.
Thank you. We can come back to the floor for a question. There you go.
Thank you. Hello. Hi, my name is Narupat Ratanakit. I'm an intern at the East West Center. I have a question regarding South Korea's nuclear sharing and what that implication is for Japan, because if you look at the polls, Japan's stance on owning nuclear weapons is very, very low as compared to South Korea. And so how this integrated deterrence can be communicated from public level? And is there an entrusting guidance for the domestic politics for the population in the region as well? And that what efforts does the United States can do that strengthening if the United States is willing to share its nuclear weapons with Korea? How does Japan see that, even though they're in a trilateral alliance? Thank you.
That's a tough one. Maybe I'll go to you first, and then.
Let me start with it. South Korea has been talking about nuclear weapons reintroducing nuclear weapons on the peninsula for quite some time, at the track 2 level, and I suppose even on the official level, although I don't know that. The best answer that I've seen given was that if South Korea, for its own political reasons, really needs to have nuclear weapons on the peninsula, then they will be our weapons, not theirs. Number one, in practical terms, we have the rest of the arsenal. Nuclear weapons are not cheap. So it would not work to have Korea on it. Secondly, for obvious reasons, we want to own the weapon because we have an alliance with Japan and other alliances in the Pacific. What was the second part of the question? Regarding the population of the whole, because they're very different from South Korea and Japan. Right. Well, And again, General Sugiyama can speak to it better than I can, but whenever I've talked to Japanese friends, either formally or informally, and brought the subject up, the answer was no. Absolutely not.
杉山さん。
ありがとうございます。私は国連の下での安全保障っていうのを考えたときに、パーマネント5というのは基本的に核を自分たちは持つ。それを、プロリファレーションさせないで、世界全体の安全を保つというのも最初の設立当時の目標だったんだと思っています。そういう意味で言うと、私はいろんな意見ありますけれども、実際にいろんな国が別の国が核を持つということに対して私は反対をします。ただ逆にユークレーンウォーで分かるように核の、拡大抑止ということについてのクレディビリティが決して高くないというか下がったというふうに私はユークレーンウォーの時も今でも思ってるんですけれども、そういう意味で言うと各国が核の傘の下にいるかどうかということの、信頼性というのは各国が、確証したいっていう要求があるのは当然だと思っています。ですから、それぞれの国が、もちろんチップが言ったように、アメリカの核をその国との間でどうシェアするか、そのヨーロッパであるような核シェアリングになるかどうかは別にして、多分それぞれの国に適した持ち方があるんだろうと思いますけれども、そういうところで、シェアをして、アメリカの核をシェアするっていうのはそれぞれの国で逆に私はやるべきなんだろうというふうに思っています。
Thank you for the thoughts. The clock is, even though the clock on the wall is running a few minutes fast, we are actually coming to the end of the hour. So this may have to be our last question. Since we're on this, US-Japan are okay, and thank you for opening that aperture with your question. This one also is on the US-Japan are okay security relations. Does the current Japanese government support the formation of a formal military alliance between US, Japan, and ROK? Is it possible for Japan to take such a step under the current constitution? If not, when do you think the Kishida or future Japanese administration might be able to propose an amendment to the constitution to enable that kind of a formal trilateral alliance relationships?
非常にタフクエスチョンですけれども僕自身は正直に思うのは3カ国で同盟を組めたら本当に素晴らしいことだろうと思います。ただそれぞれにディフィカルティを持っていて、それがいずれ実現するとしても、私は実現してもいいと思いますけれども、当面は難しいんだろうと。だからこそ今はバイラテラルの関係をそれぞれに築いて、その中での協力関係を、高めるということが大事なんだというふうに思っています。
Your view on the potential US-Japan ROK formal trilateral military alliance?
I don't know that that's possible in any relevant time frame. On the other hand, there are various military measures that can and should be taken that enable the necessary cooperation to protect the interest of each country. One is the bilateral intelligence sharing relationship. Another is considering the range of missiles, the speed of missiles. We need to have the modalities in place to allow Korean air and missile defense networks to integrate with Japan's air and missile defense networks at the business end, in the shooting down of a missile or shooting down of an airplane. We don't necessarily need a formal alliance to do that, but we do need to take note of the fact that a conflict in Korea is not going to stay in Korea. It's going to spill over into Japan and into the rest of the Pacific, because North Korea now has the ability to reach Japan, whereas in 1950, the model that shaped all our thinking, they didn't have the ability to do that. So.
Actually, I do have time for one more question, if there are questions from the floor.
Yes, sorry, I'm a fellow at the Reischauer Policy Center at Johns Hopkins SAIS, and we've been talking a lot about the multilateral relationships with Japan, US, and ROK with a bit of Taiwan, but I think a broader scope question is, are there any substantial like policy efforts within the US-Japan collaboration for expanding security relations with other countries in the region right now? Like, is there any mechanism in place by which you can engage collaboratively? Does that make sense?
Thank you. Maybe either of you want to talk about the maybe Japan, Australia, US, Japan, Australia, India, and such.
You brought up Australia, Yuki, the Australia, US, UK agreement, Australia, UK, US, AUKUS agreement certainly brought Australia to the fore, and Australia, having been burned by Chinese political warfare efforts, has increased their readiness and their capabilities, and the AUKUS agreement is obviously an unprecedented sharing of US technology with Australia, and vice versa with Australian technology coming this way. So that's part of it, from big in the case of Australia to small in the case of Palau, the Marshalls, the Federated States of Micronesia, and other places. Yes, we're working on enhancing defense relationships there, particularly Palau, since given where it's situated between the Philippines and Guam.
I did want to elaborate a little bit more on the question, because I'm specifically looking at Japan and America collaborating to expand those relationships together. In the case of Australia, I think that's very similar to what we've been talking about so far, where it's multiple bilateral relations. But I'm looking specifically at Japan and America's efforts to collaboratively expand their security interests in the region.
Well, Prime Minister Abe invented the Quad, and the United States has fortunately signed on to this. Japan, US, Australia, India. I know Japan, one of the other good things that Prime Minister Abe did was make it legal and acceptable for Japanese defense articles to be exported to other countries. And Japanese friends are talking about changing AUKUS to JAUKUS, JA, etc., only leaving the J silent. So that's in a sense the cooperation of it. There's also probably without formal agreement, at least none announced publicly, Prime Minister Modi scolding Vladimir Putin at the recent conference certainly worked in our favor. So I don't know how to answer it any better than that. I'm not, there's no publicly available minutes of a Quad meeting or anything that I know of, but it's still cooperation nonetheless.
Sugiyama-san, you have the last word.
ありがとうございます。私は、自身の経験からもあれですけれども、非常に日米が協力して、仲間を増やす、先ほど言ったアメリカのシーズイニシアチブというのがそういうイニシアチブだという話をしましたけれども、日米の協力で仲間を増やすっていうことを、別に指示を受けてるわけではないけれども、それぞれでやってるという認識です。例えば私が航空幕僚長の時、太平洋空軍のオショナシー司令官と一緒になって、2人で例えばアジアの国となんかミーティングをするときには、2人で誰かと会うっていうようなことをしましたし、あるいはその ASEAN の国10カ国は空軍ベースですけれども、年1回持ち回りで、集合した会議をします。でそこに私はフィリピンで行われたときに、第5空軍司令官の、と一緒に、メインプレゼンターでプレゼンテーションをしました。 で、その時一緒に行った時に、ASEAN の国というのは、日米が、一緒になっていろいろリーダーシップ発揮をしてくれることに対して、すごく期待をしてくれてるという感じがしますし、私は正直言って、日本に対してリーダーシップを発揮してほしいと思っている国がたくさんあるというのを感じました。もちろん、ASEAN の国は、ダイバーシティ、いろんな多様なので、必ずしも一枚岩ではないけれども、非常にその気持ち、日本に対する希望というのが多くて、例えば正直言って、日本がアメリカと一緒だから安心して、協力できるっていう感じさえ持っているように、私には感じられました。ですから、そういう意味で言うと、決まったリジットなフレームワークがあるのかないのか私は分からないけれども、それぞれのサービスやいろんなところで日米が協力をして仲間を増やそうっていうことを一生懸命努力してるっていうのが現状ではないかと私は想像しています。
Thank you for those thoughts. And now I think we are officially at the end of the hour. This has been a very rich conversation. Thank you for very, very good questions. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to some of your questions, especially for the Zoom audience. But I would like to thank both General Sugiyama and General Gregson for joining us this morning. And please be reminded, please leave those headsets outside as you exit. But with that, thank you again for joining us this morning. This has been a really wonderful conversation. So I hope you can join me in thanking the two wonderful students.